Hey, Pet Service Pros, this is your host, Anthony Flores. Before we get to the show, I would like to personally extend an invitation for you to join us at Pierre.fm. Pierre is a pet service marketplace that helps pet service stores accept bookings through our website and super simple to use mobile app. Just think, guys, Expedia for pet services. It's free to join. There are no setup fees, no minimums. You only pay when you get orders, and you can cancel our service anytime. Guys, consumer behavior is changing and consumers expect a simple and transparent way to book your services. Whether you're an established pet service store and looking to stay ahead of the game or new to the pet service industry, Pierre can help you to grow your business. To learn more, visit us at Pierre.fm today. Pierre.fm. Now let's get to the show. Hey listeners, we're back and I'm Anthony Flores. And today we talk to Sara du Bouchet, one of the co-founders of the highly rated dog training company in California called Tully's, and how they took their passion for animals and grew it into one of the top dog training companies in California. We're also going to discuss the future of dog training, why all dog trainers are not created equal, and tips and tricks to train your own pets and become a better leader at the same time. Whether you're looking to start a dog training company of your own or currently run a dog training business, Sara helps us understand what it takes to thrive in the fast-growing dog training industry. You're not going to want to miss this one, you guys, so we hope you enjoy the show.
From the Pierre headquarters in Los Angeles, Pierre presents The Shift, a pet services podcast. A show where pet service pros learn the latest trends in design, marketing, technology, and the stories from other pet industry entrepreneurs and the businesses they built.
The Shift. Sara.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm great. How are you doing?
Good. So we have Sara from Tully's here, and we're super excited to actually have you here.
I'm really excited to be here. This is my first podcast. I can't wait.
So, for the listeners, I want to paint a picture of LA for everyone, right? So today it's about 80 degrees, right? Mm-hmm. And if you look at, and I think I've had a little bit too much sun, actually. I was actually upstairs kind of late in the sun, so I'm a little bit red probably. And rosé in hand, right?
That makes you more red, I think.
You look a little bit red too, now that I think about it.
Well, it helps for the pictures.
That's right. So Sara is she's with a company called Tully's, and they're one of the top dog trainers in the LA area. And I'm actually from LA. I'm actually a native here in Los Angeles. And I want to go back real quick to the weather, because we were talking about New York too. You lived in New York for a while, and I kind of go back and forth too.
Yeah.
One thing that I've seen is that this year in LA, the weather has been it's been kind of glorious. We've actually had 4 seasons. If you're from New York and you're actually visiting, you're like, what the fuck? I didn't come all the way out here to get rain and to get...
That's kind of how I've been feeling this year, to be honest.
Yeah.
I've been here for too long.
It's pretty crazy. Yeah. So glad to have you here. So talk about your, your kind of upbringing. Let's kind of go back a little bit, your backstory and how you got into the dog training business.
Okay. All the way back to my upbringing, huh?
All right. You know what? Just get it. just tell us where you were raised.
No. I actually, funny enough, we never had a dog as a kid. That's kind of a lie. We had a Cocker Spaniel for 2 weeks. My dad's ex-business partner brought it to him as a surprise for his birthday, which, guys, that's a bad idea. If you're ever thinking of giving someone a dog as a gift and they don't know about it, don't do it.
Oh, wow.
Because, we want advice this early in the podcast, I think. So my mom wasn't happy with that. I don't blame her. We tried and just wasn't a fit for us at the time because we just were never home. So it wasn't fair to the dog. She ended up having a nice life with our friends, so it ended well. But we didn't have a dog. We had a cat, we had a rabbit, lots of hamsters, fish. But I never had dogs until I started volunteering when I moved to LA. So how I got into the biz, I was volunteering at the Glendale Humane Society, which is an amazing place. It's not part of the National Humane Society, if you will. It's a really small shelter in Glendale here in LA. They do pull a lot of dogs from higher kill shelters, which is really nice. And they are no kill. So a lot of the dogs, if they have maybe some issues that deem them less adoptable, maybe if they have anxiety or are maybe not so great with other dogs or kids or certain types of people, they might get stuck there for a while. So I worked with a team of trainers and volunteers there to kind of develop programs for these dogs specifically to help them become more adoptable. So we were doing a lot of behavior modification with these dogs. And that was really where I kind of learned a lot about dog behavior, psychology, if you will, and how to train dogs. So it's really kind of an unregulated industry. And most people who are trainers work with mentors. They do a lot of self-study. So I got the chance to do a lot of that there. And then after I'd been there for a few years, I met Mary Tully, who's one of the co-founders of Tully's Training, hence the name Tully. Mm-hmm. She and her wife, Alex, founded the company in 2013. And I met her the following year at Glendale Humane. So she came in as a trainer as well. And she hired me from there. They were kind of at the point where they needed more trainers, and the rest is history.
It's interesting, like going back as it relates to certification and what you're seeing out there, I think, in the industry is there's a lot of people that kind of ordain themselves as a dog trainer.
Yeah.
Can you talk about, regulation and perhaps certification and what qualifies you as a dog trainer today?
As far as what qualifies you, that kind of is up to whoever chooses to say they're a dog trainer. Mm-hmm. Like I was saying before, it's kind of an unregulated industry, unfortunately. So, you're kind of trusting people who say they are trainers, that they have done their due diligence and, learned what they need to learn in order to help you. There are a couple of foundations and councils that do certify dog trainers through, a more legitimate process, I would say. The biggest one at this point, I would say, is the Certification Council for Professional Dog Trainers. So the certification I have is through them, and it's called CPDTKA. So that stands for Certified Professional Dog Trainer Knowledge Assessed. And that entails keeping a training log for a good number of hours, having an attestation statement signed by either a veterinarian or another CPDT stating that you know what you're doing and you deserve this title. And then you do have to take an exam as well. So, it's still not a degree, but it does at least take some time and effort to say that you have this certification. They also offer the CPDT-KSA, which is knowledge and skills assessed. So that's something you can get further your certification with once you pass the knowledge assessed exam. The skills come in where you submit videos of yourself training. I believe it's 10 different dogs, specific behaviors. So that takes a little bit longer to become certified in. And then they also offer a CBCC, which is Certified Canine Behavior Consultant. And so that refers to being able to consult with behavior modification. So things like anxiety, aggression, reactivity, things like that. So in my opinion, those two certifications should just be an all-encompassing one. Mm-hmm. Because myself and all the trainers I work with and every other, really good trainer that I know can do everything. They're not just training basic behaviors. They should be able to go into a home and see, okay, these are This is what's going on. This is how this dog's quality of life is being impacted. This is how you can adjust your environment and your schedule and your lifestyle to potentially help your dog. Most people who call a trainer don't just need help teaching their dog to sit. At that point, they need real help. Their dog is tearing up the furniture when they're home alone, or their dog is, like we were kind of discussing before, peeing and pooping in the house when they were house trained for 5 years. Or their dog, every time they see another dog on a walk, they lunge and bark, and it's really unpleasant. So most people need help with those kind of issues. So in my opinion, I think there should just be an all-encompassing certification for that. There is another certification that I would consider a pretty good one. It's through the IAABC, which I should have looked up because I don't want to misquote it. But it is more of the behavior consultant lean, and you can actually become certified as a behavior consultant for different species of animals. So you could do like a dog specific, a cat specific. I think there's a bird specific one. So that is a much more involved process where you do have to get letters of recommendation and you have to do case studies. So to me, that's almost like that would be closer to getting a degree in my mind.
Yeah.
So, if you're looking for a trainer, I think those would be two good certifications to look for.
So let me ask you, as it relates to behavior, how much of our own current state of well-being plays a role into what you do? As far as like how you train? As far as the people. So you've got a dog that clearly has behavioral issues. How much of those issues are related to the owner of the dog?
I think a good amount most of the time. It's not always. A lot of times it starts smaller, and it may or may not be your own emotional state that's contributing to it, but we definitely reinforce behaviors that we don't mean to reinforce.
Mm-hmm.
I was just talking to a friend who just got a new dog, and they basically just want to know, like, how do we not fuck up this dog?
Right.
And, that's one of the points I always hit on with most clients is, dogs, the good thing about dogs is that they don't live in a state of, I'm trying to get revenge, or I'm trying to make you mad, or I actually know that I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. They don't do that. Mm-hmm. That's human psychology. I think there could be an argument for dogs that, like to be naughty and because it's fun, and they want to see what you're going to do. But I think that most of the bad, quote unquote, behavior we see with dogs is because they've been reinforced for it. So something like, say, a dog who barks at other dogs on leash. Obviously, your dog lunges and barks at another dog. You're not giving them a treat and being like, good job. But that dog is actually could be reinforcing his or herself because, if they're afraid of that dog, or maybe they're guarding the person, or maybe they're just frustrated because they want to go say hi and they hit the end of their leash and they can't get any farther and they don't understand why. That behavior then kind of reinforces itself because every single solitary time they see a dog after that, they do the same thing, then it just becomes repeated behavior.
So what should an owner do if something like that happens? If a dog is kind of lunging out at someone, what is the proper course of action for, a dog owner?
It depends on the situation, but a really good place to start in most cases is environmental management. So what that means is most dogs in that situation specifically are feeling some sort of anxiety or fear or frustration. So a good place to start is giving them more space. Mm-hmm. So, it would be like if, most people don't want to have a rattlesnake in their lap, right? Most of us would steer away from them because they could hurt you. So if I were to just put a rattlesnake in your lap right now, you would probably have a reaction. You might yell, or you might get up, or you might stomp your feet or throw it, or something would happen. Whereas if I were to put it all the way across the room, you might not like that it's there, but you would be able to maybe remain calm and kind of think about how you're going to handle this situation going forward. So really space for dogs and for people and most species of animals, if they're having some sort of anxiety or reaction, that's a good place to start.
And how do you know that? Is that a perfect sign? Dog lunges out at someone. Do we assume that is that an anxiety issue or?
It depends. So that's where we would kind of need to get a better idea of what else is going on in that dog's life. How long has it been going on? Did it just start? Has it been the way that the dog handles that its whole life, or did it start at a certain age? Was there a preceding event that might have caused it? So I think most trainers who work with behavior modification, especially in LA, most dogs we work with have some level of anxiety, which is completely understandable. We go in and we do a consultation first with the people and the dog. So we kind of get a better idea of a holistic view of that dog's life. So it's not going to be super beneficial to just go out and try and treat the symptoms. Mm-hmm. You're not really getting to the root of the problem then. You're not going to take an aspirin if you break your ankle. You need to go and deal with what's going on and get a cast on so that worse things don't happen down the road. So barking and lunging and most anxiety symptoms are there because there's another underlying issue. So sometimes it's something as simple as the dog's not getting enough exercise on a daily basis. It could be something about the dog's diet. Maybe the dog's in pain. Maybe the dog has a genetic issue that has caused it. So it really is good to get in there and kind of get a better picture of the dog's daily life and then make a better assessment that way.
We were talking, off the mic here, and basically you were mentioning that dogs have a really heightened, sense of feeling, touch, noises, etc. How much does that play into it? I mean, they're just super, super sensitive in that way, mm-hmm. right?
Yeah, I think it plays into it quite a bit, probably more than we even understand as people. We were talking about this because Mary, my business partner, and I were at the California Science Center where they're having a dogs exhibit right now, which is really cool. We're actually going to be doing a partnership with them, with the exhibit. We've been doing some demonstrations for them. So we were actually, with all of our experience, we were amazed, especially there's an exhibit or part of the exhibit that's interactive where you can stick your head inside and there's headphones there and they'll play a sound kind of just like regular household noises. And this is what the human hears. And then this is what the dog hears.
Wow.
And the dog is you can hear things in the walls. You can hear what's going on next door. You can hear what's going on, like people walking past the house. It's just amazing. And we were both kind of astounded that, dogs can live in a city and not just be freaking out 24 hours a day because of all of the stimulation that they're getting constantly.
There was I want to say there's a psychic that I was, a guy named Medical Medium. He's like all over Instagram and stuff.
Okay.
And he said that he mentioned something, he has the ability to kind of scan someone and he can see if there's any health issues, right?
Interesting.
And he has to learn how to turn it off, right? Where he says he jumps in a plane, he's like, oh, that person has something wrong with their spine. Oh, and it's a voice that's constantly talking to them.
Oh, man.
It kind of reminds me of basically what you're saying about dogs and the stuff the chatter that's actually happening. I mean, it's involuntarily too. It's just...
Yeah, that sounds awful. I can't imagine just like constantly being bombarded with that.
It's kind of what dogs are going through, right?
Oh, yeah. No, it really gave me an even better appreciation for what you're going through or what they're going through and, people not really understanding that.
That's crazy. One thing that I remember is that when I would walk my dog, Pierre, by the end of the day, like if we took him out for the day, he's mm-hmm. burnt. So he's not chasing after anyone. He's not lunging out at anyone.
Yeah.
That makes a difference, right? The fact that the enrichment of walking, kind of playing with the dogs, etc.
Absolutely. Yeah. not most, all dog breeds, when they were first bred, hundreds of years ago, they were bred for specific jobs. So dogs used to always work alongside humans. So there's dogs that are meant to kill vermin. There are dogs that are meant to herd livestock. There are dogs that are meant to guard the property. And there are dogs that are meant to retrieve, the birds that you shoot. And we don't really use our dogs for those jobs as much anymore, but they still have that in their DNA. So, you have, I have a lab, and if he is just sitting in the house for 8 or 10 hours or 12 hours a day with nothing else to do, he's probably going to figure something out to do for himself. He's going to give himself a job.
Like rip up the couch?
Sure. My dog's never done that. No, my dog goes for shoes. He likes shoes. And he barks at the window. But that's beside the point. He needs a trainer. But, that is definitely, I think, plays into a lot of the stress that dogs can go through in modern households, especially if people are working all day and they're just kind of hanging out by themselves. They're like, what's my job here? What am I supposed to be doing?
Right. So if you guys are listening, make sure that you're walking your dogs daily.
Yeah.
And kind of burn them out, right? Maybe take them to the park and...
Take them to the park, figure out, a way to get them really moving a lot. There are dogs like your bulldogs and your French bulldogs and your pugs that don't have the capacity for a lot of physical exercise, but all dogs also need mental exercise. And that's something we kind of don't think of a lot. But, things like solving puzzles, dogs are really good problem solvers, which is why, you have the dog that you come home and they've eaten their entire bag of dog food that was in the closet somehow. They're real smart, and they're very, very good at figuring out how to do stuff if no one's helping them do it. So, and that's where you also get a lot of that unwanted behavior that's real normal for dogs, but people don't like it because it messes up their house, or it affects their relationship with their neighbors because their dog is barking because they think they're supposed to be guarding the house, So it's still all in there.
It's interesting because it's almost like your dog's behavior is a reflection of you in some ways.
Yeah.
Because they just so depend on you. If, the output that you put out, you get input and output, right? So if you're not doing something, you're actually going to get that output from your dog that says, hey, in his behavior, the way that they're acting, it's a constant, there's a correlation. Right?
Totally. Yeah, we kind of forget that our dogs are really intelligent animals. They've, not everybody, but I think a lot of people just almost think of a dog as, and this is not the right word, but an accessory almost.
Yeah.
Or like part of the furniture.
Sure.
And that, again, that's not exactly what I'm trying to say, because that sounds like people don't love their dogs, which most people do. But, we don't really appreciate the full spectrum of how much they need on a daily basis as far as just being an intelligent little being.
You know what? Discuss that for a minute, because I think that's super important. Going back to what you just said, how can we become, I guess, better people for our dogs? How can we become better leaders for them?
I think a good place to start is before you get a dog, do some research. If you want a specific breed, ask yourself, why do you want that breed? Is it because of the way it looks? Is it because you've always had them? Is it because your friend has one and that dog's super cool? It really should be, you should be trying to match a dog with your realistic expectations and current lifestyle and schedule. If you're a retiree, if you're, 70, 75, and you have a pretty calm daily schedule, you probably wouldn't want to get, a border collie puppy, because that dog's going to need a ton of work, and it's going to need a ton of exercise. And if, you might not be able to give it to that dog, maybe you should look into adopting a senior dog, a bulldog, or a dog that just likes to sit on the couch and, kind of hang out with you and do like simple exercises. if you have a dog and, you don't really know much about it, there's a lot of good information. You don't even have to go to the library now. There's Google. And also, I don't know if you mind if I suggest a couple of trainers for people to research.
Absolutely.
Because there is a lot of information out there, and it can be conflicting and confusing. There's still a lot of old school information that people still are kind of clinging to, that doesn't really apply. There's been a lot more modern research that proves otherwise, but some people are really resistant to change. So some trainers that I really respect and look up to are Patricia McConnell is a great one. Dr. Sophia Yin, Ian Dunbar is great. Jean Donaldson, Karen Pryor, Terry Ryan. I just did a chicken training camp with her. She's amazing.
That sounds so funny.
It was
chicken
amazing.
Training camp.
Oh,
right.
yeah.
We'll talk about that one in a sec.
But those are all good. They're all very Googleable. Ian Dunbar, if you go on his website, which I believe is called Dog Star Daily, he does offer 2 of his books for free download. One is before you get a puppy and one is after you get your puppy. And it's basically anything you would ever need to know about having a dog in your house. And he offers them for free. And he actually offers them to other trainers to put their own logo on because, this information, he believes so wholeheartedly that it should be shared with everybody. So, it's people like those people who are very transparent and they're very honest about their backgrounds. And, a lot of them have PhDs and, I really look up to those people because they've seen a lot of things and they really know, they've done a lot of research and they really know what they're talking about.
That's interesting because, I was going to ask you about, are there any studies being done, anything interesting that you can, I guess, discuss as it's related to animals? I know that, scientists use, mice, et cetera, for studies, but I wonder, is there a correlation between, dogs? Do they think differently than a mouse does? Do they think differently than a cat does? I want to kind of understand, they're I guess, a little bit more about how they're different, right? And are there studies out there that are something interesting that are being done with dogs that, people should know about?
Yeah, I am not a scientist by any means. I wish I was. But and I've really only worked with dogs and domestic animals. So I can't really speak to so much the difference between their cognition, so to speak. But I do know that all animals learn the same way, humans included.
So there's kind of a universal kind of, I guess, understanding or rule, right? As it relates to animals. Okay.
Yeah, and it just depends on your species. So, if a dog is meant for something different than a mouse or a bird. So they're going to learn the same way a mouse or a bird would, but you have to kind of take their purpose into account, so in order to reinforce behaviors or punish behaviors, you need to understand what is meaningful to the dog. So, a bone is going to be reinforcing to a dog, but a bone's not necessarily going to be reinforcing to a mouse or a person. So that's where I think the difference would lie in as far as how they learn and how they're reinforced as well.
Let's talk, kind of neurofeedback. We don't have to go. You're not a scientist, so I get it. But
I'm going to pretend I am. I'm going to sound really good right now.
Explain the feedback loop. So, with animals and learning, how do you know when something you're teaching clicks?
Well, you can kind of gauge by their body language. You can gauge by if they're engaged. It's kind of a Psych 101 concept, operant conditioning, right? So B.F. Skinner created the Skinner box where he developed the theory of operant conditioning. So he didn't come up with it. It existed, but he's kind of the one who first researched it and discovered that it was how people and animals learn. So basically you have the reinforcement side and you have the punishment side. So reinforcement is meant to increase behavior and punishment is meant to decrease behavior. So when we talk about, say, for example, positive reinforcement, which is a very popular way of training, that's what we use at Tully's training. That's where you're talking about adding something into the environment in order to increase the frequency of a behavior that you're trying to teach. So for sit, your dog puts their butt down, you give them a treat, they're going to want to sit again, as long as they like treats. If they don't like food, which is rare with dogs, you might want to use a toy or use a game or use some sort of life reward, like getting to go on a walk or going on a car ride. There's all sorts of things that are considered reinforcement. So basically, if you want to increase the frequency of a behavior with any animal, you need to figure out what reinforces that animal. If you want to decrease a behavior with any animal, you need to figure out what that animal considers a punishment. And so again, punishment isn't always bad. It kind of has a negative connotation. Mm-hmm. Punishment just means we're trying to decrease this behavior. So we do actually use a form of punishment in our training, which is it's called negative punishment. So this means you're removing a stimulus from the environment in order to decrease the frequency of a behavior. And a good example is your dog jumps up on you when you walk in the door. So you're the reinforcement and your attention is the reinforcement, most likely in that scenario. So your dog jumps up on you and you ignore them. And in theory, over time, they will stop jumping on you because they're not getting any sort of... They're not getting what they're looking for, basically. So I feel like I didn't actually answer the question you asked me. I just got into a big nerdy loop about operant conditioning. But you were talking about feedback, right?
Yeah. And I think you kind of touched on it early on. I mean, you can kind of observe them and I guess quickly see if something you're doing is actually working or not.
Right. So yeah, you want to watch the dog's body. If they look like they're trying to get away from you, that's a pretty good sign that it's not reinforcing to them. If they are trying to get closer to you or they're really engaged and they're not leaving, I would say that they're being reinforced. And there's, that's kind of black and white. There's more gray areas to it. But in general, I think you can, and most people know their dogs too. They know what their dog enjoys and what would be something that they would want to work for again.
My dog Pierre, like there's times where he's just kind of staring at me and I'm like, what exactly?
What do you want?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What are they telling us? Is that their way of communicating?
It could be. I mean, it could be that you just have something shiny on you and you don't know. But
so it could be something really simple too.
Yeah, I think most of the time it is. I think we like to overthink everything. But sometimes it's not. I mean, my dog does that with my husband. He'll be sitting on the couch and Moose will just come over and stare at him and then start barking. So he clearly wants something from my husband. And my husband's like, I don't know what he's doing.
Right.
I was like, well, at some point you probably fed him off your plate while you're sitting on the couch. And he liked that. And he's like, hey, can we do that again? We can't ask them, but you can kind of... That's what I'm saying. We don't really pay attention to our own behavior.
Yeah.
But our dogs pick up on everything because they're nonverbal. So they're really attuned to what we do with our bodies and what we reinforce them with. So, they're going to remember something that maybe happened once or twice, 3 weeks ago. And we're like, I have no idea what you're talking about, dude.
Yeah. I've heard, I don't know if it's a fallacy or not, but that, dogs they don't have a short-term memory. What is the truth? I mean, can they remember far back or are they just so present that it doesn't matter?
As far as I understand, they don't really have a memory like we do. Mm-hmm. They do remember, the word remember is kind of...
or like a recollection, or
yeah, it's they do remember trauma, or they can,
mm-hmm.
Some dogs, something traumatic will happen once and it affects them forever.
Yep.
I don't know that they really are remembering exactly the whole incident like we would, but it's just the car door slammed on my tail, so now I'm afraid of car doors. It might not be that they remember that their tail was slammed in a car door, but they know that the car is bad for some reason.
And the feeling too, right?
Yeah.
Like physically the feeling.
Right. So, they obviously remember like people and places and, certain types of toys and games and things like that. And, we can teach them behaviors. We can teach the dog to stay and not do it for a week and ask them to stay a week later and they'll remember it. But as far as I understand, their memory is not exactly the same as ours is. Parts of it are, but they don't really remember long-term events, if you will, as far as I know. I could be wrong. There could be a study in progress right now that's going to completely prove that wrong.
Is it still early days as far as studies as it relates to dogs?
I mean, it's not super early days, but I feel like as far as really appreciating dogs for being as intelligent as they are, I think we're really finding out a lot more now than we used to, because we just have access to more technology now. I remember reading about a study that was pretty recent where they would they'd train dogs to lay in an MRI machine, and they would have, I don't know if it's the owner or just a handler or I think what it was is they had the owner stand in front of the dog with food, and they were kind of testing which areas of the dog's brain lit up. And I'm doing a really good job of telling the story.
Did they have like a functional brain scan on the dog?
I believe they were just kind of watching it in real time. So it was involving food and which parts of their brain are involved when they're eating or when they recognize food.
That's cool.
And so certain parts of their brain would light up when they'd see food or when they'd eat. And I think they also did it with people. Like certain parts of the brain would correspond with their owner.
Yes.
And then another person would come in and it wouldn't be exactly the same. So I wish I could really describe this study in detail and sound really amazing. But that's how my own brain works. It just selects bits and pieces of things. But it was pretty cool. I'm sure you could look it up. I don't know where it was or who was running it, but it was pretty cool. So I think we're doing a lot more things like that nowadays just because we have access to that kind of technology. Whereas before we just assumed they were kind of slaves to their masters, We didn't think they were stupid, but we didn't really appreciate all the things they can do now.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, I always trip out on my own dog. Like he can hear a skateboard, like maybe a block or two away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's crazy. I mean, my dog, and this is one of my least favorite things about him, but he'll in the middle of the night, so our bedroom's downstairs and our front door's upstairs. In the middle of the night, he'll leap up out of a deep sleep and go, woo, 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 and run upstairs. And we're just like waiting for people to break into our house. We're like, what is he doing?
Right. And
usually nothing happens. But my assumption would be he heard a car down the street or he heard somebody walk by our house or whatever, It just is, it's pretty crazy.
That is crazy. I remember growing up, we had a friend, my uncle had a friend that would come over, and he's a big guy, and he kind of walked a little bit funny too.
Yeah.
And our dogs would just go freaking ballistic over him, right? Yeah. And we just knew he was coming. And I'm wondering, like, are they picking up on like his energy, or are they picking up on the way that he's walking? Like, what are they picking up on?
It probably depends on the dog. I would imagine that person moved differently than most people they were familiar with. Or maybe he just, a lot of times weird movement kind of can be a little scary for dogs, I think. But I don't know. Maybe he smelled like something that bothered them. Maybe he, was wearing a weird pair of glasses. We can't really ask them. We can just kind of guess by deduction.
Yeah. Here, I'll tell you another funny story. So my dog Pierre we have a little front yard. It's not gated, right? So we kind of just trust him. It's on the honor system.
That's really nice for him.
Good for him, right?
Yeah.
Not so much for us. So there was a lady, she probably had to have been maybe 85. She's walking down the sidewalk. He sees her. She moves really slow. She's really old. Mm-hmm. He just bolts after her. And he grabs onto the back of her pants, right? And I'm like, holy shit, I don't want to get sued by someone, right? The lady was so old, she didn't even notice.
Oh, well, great.
I was like, Pierre, what the hell are you doing? And I feel like he kind of gets freaked out over the way that older people move. It's just the weirdest thing.
It could be. I mean, especially if he's not surrounded by them on a regular basis. They do move differently, you know? Kids move differently. That's why a lot of kids are scary to dogs too, because they're much more unpredictable than large, tall people.
That's a good point. He has a problem with kids too.
Yeah. Yeah, so it kind of depends, and it doesn't necessarily mean anything bad happened to them because of an old person or a kid. It just means it looks weird.
It's patterns, right? They're looking at pattern recognition too.
Probably. I mean, if you think about it from their perspective, if most of the time your dog just sees the people that lives in his house with him, if he sees something that looks different than that he's not used to, that's going to be weird for him.
So is there a way to kind of unteach Pierre to not do that?
There is. There's a couple of things you can do. How old is Pierre?
He's 10.
Okay. So again, your first step would be more environmental management. So if he's just got free reign of the yard and it's not fenced in, he can do whatever he wants, right?
Gotcha.
So unless you're out there with him and you can physically stop him, there's no reason he's not going to do that. So this is where, you have to change your own behavior in order for your dog to change their behavior. Because if nothing changes in their world, why would they think anything's different? So I'd recommend either staying out there with him when he's outside, so you have some semblance of control, or I don't know if you know when that person takes their walk, but maybe he's not outside when that person's going to be walking by your house. So things like that is what I mean by management. So really like planning ahead more to prevent him from doing what he's currently doing. So what we're talking about is an established behavior that we would like to change. So then you also need to teach him an incompatible behavior, meaning he can't chase the lady and bite her in the leg and also do this other thing at the same time. So it could be teaching him boundaries, like he stays in his yard and, you teach him to stay at the edge of the yard. Maybe he's got a little like spot in the yard, like a bed or something where you teach him to run to that and then lay down on cue, or, you use your own cue or you use something else as a cue. So maybe a person walks by and he goes and sits on his bed until they're gone. So it's really about, first of all, making it impossible for him to rehearse the current behavior, and then at the same time teaching him what you would prefer him to do instead.
I think that's the big piece, is that we're not doing that. Like, we're not teaching him what we prefer. We just say, stop, don't do that.
Right. And to your dog, unless you have taught them something else, why would they change? They don't. Right. He doesn't know. He probably doesn't know what stop means because he doesn't speak English, as far as we know yet. So, and it's not that, yelling something wouldn't interrupt them in the moment, but even if that works in the moment, you're still not teaching him what you want him to do the next time that same thing happens. So unless you're going to stand out there and yell stop at him every single time, there's a chance that he's going to do it again. Therefore, reinforcing his own behavior that you don't like. So, yeah.
It's a vicious circle. You got to stay on top of it.
Yeah, for sure.
Something that I thought was interesting is just kind of, life extension as it relates to animals. This is a big subject that, a lot of scientists for ourselves are looking into, and there's a lot of breakthroughs as it's actually related to, diet, sleep, just our lifestyle in general. So I guess, how does that play a role in a dog's life? I mean, how do we expand their lives?
You mean just keeping them healthier in general?
Keeping them healthier.
Yeah.
I think the mental health is a big issue that we just don't address as dog owners either.
Well, I think that all plays into getting them enough daily enrichment too. It's not that dissimilar to people. If you are in your own house all day, every day for a month, and then you try and go out to dinner with your friends, you might seem a little weird, because you haven't had a lot of social interaction. And it's almost as if there's a social part of your brain that kind of atrophies because you're not using it. And I think that happens a lot with dogs is, we were talking about before, even if you get like 1 or 2 walks a day, that might be an hour or 2 out of 24 hours. And then 22 hours a day, you're just in the house, not really doing much else. So I think as far as mental health goes, just really like, and I'm not suggesting taking your dog everywhere with you because that's not always good for all dogs either. But finding a balance, like getting to know your own dog and finding a balance and, giving them what they need every day. As far as physically, there's a lot of new kind of food products out there. I know like the raw food movement is a big deal right now. I feed my dog raw food and it seems to work well for him. I think it just depends on, your own dog or cat and what works for them. And I always advise to talk to your vet about it too if you're thinking of switching, just because there are good ways of, if you want to transfer them from kibble to raw or vice versa, there's a safer way to do it so they don't get sick. And there are some dogs that should be eating certain types of food as well, just because of their own personal constitution too. But yeah, there's a lot of, again, just like with behavior and cognition, there's a lot of new research out there as far as nutrition and diet goes too for dogs.
Clarity. You get so much more clarity. Like I've recently started to change my diet and I just feel more clear. I've got more energy. And I think that people they don't look at that.
Yeah.
It's always like, let's chase the problem on the outside, but actually what's happening on the inside is more important.
Yeah.
Like that diet, for myself, it's huge. And I know there's a lot of parallels.
Oh, for sure.
With animals too. So I think that's something that people don't quite look close enough to because, like you said earlier, you can't look at your dog like a novelty.
Right.
It's you've got to, you've got to cover the bases, basically. And I think a lot of people forget that,
Oh, for sure. And it's not their fault. Nobody's out there telling them, nobody, when they go pick up their dog at the shelter or at the breeder is like, this is exactly what you need to be doing every day. And nobody tells them that before they think of getting a dog, which I don't know how we would make that happen. If I had my druthers, I would have kids in school take a class about having pets and what it really means. So you kind of grow up appreciating, like, maybe I shouldn't get a dog because my job keeps me away from home 12 hours a day. Maybe it's not the right time for me. Or maybe it's the great time for me because I work from home now, and I have all this free time to take care of a dog. So, I really think, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to be doing this right now with everything that's going on.
Let's talk about the future.
Yeah, let's.
One of my favorite things. I'm going to tell you a story about one of my favorite podcasts is how I built this. I've mentioned this several times in other interviews. And there's a great episode with the founder of Peloton. Are you familiar with Peloton, the bike?
Yeah. Yep.
So the founder's name is John Foley, and he discusses the pain point that he was experiencing early on when he started the company. He was having issues with getting reservations for a class at SoulCycle in New York City. And you lived in New York.
Yeah.
It's a big deal out there. In California, maybe not so much, but now it is becoming bigger.
Oh, yeah.
And one of the issues he had is like the really freaking cool teachers that are, great DJs and, they've got the energy that they like. They're always booked. So you've got a class that you want to take and there's 20 spots open, and then afterwards, that's it, right? So you're basically screwed if you can't get in.
Right.
And don't even try calling and telling SoulCycle that you're not going to make it to a class because they take it to you.
Really?
Yeah.
I haven't been there before. What do they do?
So, you'll still get charged for it a lot of times. I mean, you could, ask for, forgiveness, but a lot of times they're like, sorry. I mean, this class is in high demand. You're still going to pay for it.
Yeah.
So he saw that there was a pain point there. So what he did is he basically started a company called Peloton. And Peloton is actually a great way to scale that same experience on a bicycle, but with thousands of people all over the world at the same time, right? So something you guys are doing, which is kind of cool, is the online training.
Right.
And I want you to kind of discuss, I guess, your the framework behind online training, and also why are you guys doing that? What do you guys see as far as the future of training?
Well, the way we implement it is pretty much the same way we would, handle it if you called us up and you lived in LA. We start with the consultation, and we will write up a training program for you depending on the information we get from you in that consultation. So it really depends on your lifestyle, your schedule, your family members, all of those things apply. The only difference is that it happens online. So via web chat somehow, FaceTime, Google Chat, Skype, any of those we use. Just kind of depends on what you like to use the best. But you still get a private trainer. They're just not in your house, which with some issues actually is better. So things like separation anxiety, for example. You need to see, as the trainer, you need to see what happens when no one's around and the dog's alone. So that actually helps you a lot, because you can be a face in that house when the dog, as far as they're concerned, they're alone. So you can see exactly what's happening, which is, you have to know before you can treat it. Or things, if the dog is aggressive or afraid of strange people, that way you can help work these people through those issues without triggering this dog, because the dog's not going to know who you are. So That's the last thing we want to do is walk into the house and make the problem worse. So not only does it kind of open up our services to people who don't live in LA, but we also use it for people who live in LA who might have specific issues where we feel like it would be a better fit for them.
So let's take a step back. So instead of you guys actually being there, you're there virtually. So I am the proxy for you as a trainer, right? So the feedback is coming to me, and then I'm conveying that back to the dog, right?
Correct. So most of us have dogs at home. So we can, it's an important part of training to demonstrate as well. If we're at your house, we'll demonstrate with your dog. But if we're not, if you do have a dog at home, we can demonstrate on our own dog. And then we'll have you do it for us so we can watch you. And then if anything needs to be adjusted at that time, we can still watch you do it and help you then. So, it's a challenge to us too, because you have to be a really good director in that situation. So you have to be able to verbalize what you're saying and what you're trying to tell these people in a way that really makes sense to them, because you don't have the option of just showing them or physically doing anything because you're not there with them. So it's kind of a nice challenge for our trainers too. It kind of builds a different skill set that we don't always use.
That's right. I would imagine that the intake would be different because you have another party actually involved. Does anyone qualify to do online training, or I guess what is the criteria in order to get that right? Because that person that is involved, or the owner, I guess help me understand. Do they have to be a good teacher or a good listener? Or how is that different from you working directly with a dog?
As far as the trainer side of it?
Or just the whole onboarding intake situation where, you have direct feedback with an animal, and, through Skype, not so much. So I'm trying to understand, how do you engage, and does it take a specific person to get that right, so that you're fully realizing your technique through someone else.
Let me make sure I'm understanding this right. So you're talking about, does it take a certain type of trainer to be able to do that? Or does it take a certain type of client to be able to apply?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, we wouldn't turn someone away who wanted online training because we thought they weren't going to be good at it necessarily.
Right. Yeah.
Really, that's our job to help. And that's our job in person as well. Honestly, we always say we don't really work with the dogs. We work with the people. Like, we can all train dogs way more easily than people. And really, we don't take your dog away from you. We don't move in with you. So ultimately, it's the person we're working with that's going to have to apply what we're working on in most of the time that we're working with them. So whether we're in person or doing virtual training, it's our job to figure out what makes sense to that person. So because you're going to have to teach different people different ways. People are different kinds of learners. So, we can't always tell that right away. But that's another reason we do an initial consultation, is because you kind of get to know the people and you kind of get to know how they communicate with each other and with their dog. So you can use that to then apply to their training process. Because, we create training programs for these dogs. We don't do the same thing for every dog because that wouldn't make sense. Dogs are all different and people are all different. So it also wouldn't make sense to apply the same way of teaching to every single person that we work with.
That's right.
Because certain people learn visually, certain people learn in a tactile way, certain people, like I learn best if I just jump in and do it. Even if I'm horrible at something at first, I need to be able to practically apply something in order to really learn how to do it. I don't do super well with reading something and then trying to apply it. I can do it, but it's a lot more awkward for me. But some people are really good at that. So it really depends on how that person learns. So I would say it's not really up to the client. It's up to us to figure that out.
And that takes a lot of self-awareness. So you're constantly kind of assessing the situation. And now you've got two parties. Instead of you directly with the dog, now you've got the owner, and then that gets transferred back to the dog, basically.
Right. And, you always want to be constructive too. And, sometimes you can tell a person's getting frustrated, especially if it's virtual, because you're not there to be like, look, your dog can do this.
Exactly.
So, it's really about figuring out a constructive way of, you never want to be like, you're doing it wrong. You always want to be like, and this is, not to bring up chicken camp again, but it's really exciting. And I'm thinking about it a lot.
Yeah.
So Terry Ryan, the trainer who ran the camp, she also teaches people how to be better teachers. So the way she taught us, I really learned a lot just from the way she was teaching us. And one of the things she would always do is she would watch you. And even if you sucked, which I did a few times because I've never worked with chickens before and things fall apart, she would say, you know what? I really liked that you did this and this. Next time you do it, why don't you try doing this and this instead? So it was never like, that was awful, or, you really need to work on this more. It was like, these are the things you're doing really well already, and these are the things you should work on, and this is how you should work on it. So it was really like solution-oriented, which is great because I feel like most people don't naturally think that way.
Right.
People like to complain, but not really come up with solutions so much. So that's been really helpful as far as, teaching myself being a teacher as well. And you can just see people like trusting you more, which is what we want. If you don't trust us, why are you going to do anything we tell you to do?
Absolutely. I mean, speaking of trust, you guys have created a collaboration with Healthy Spot.
Yeah.
And Healthy Spot, I mean, I'm a huge fan, and I shop there at Healthy Spot too. And you guys had to have been doing something right to kind of get on their radar. So I want you to, I guess, discuss the relationship with Healthy Spot and, maybe the impact that you guys are making working with them.
Cool. You should have them on the podcast, by the way.
Mark, Andrew, dude, we're looking for you guys. So we're in touch with Destiny over there. So
cool.
We'll see if we can get those guys.
So we joined forces with them at I think it was the beginning of 2017, which I can't believe. It's flown by. I can't believe we've been working with them for that long. So the collaboration works where we teach group classes at a good amount of their stores, mostly the stores that have daycare spaces. So we'll teach in the daycare space or a large outdoor space where we can teach. Some of their classes, some of their stores, like Silver Lake, is in a mall, and they don't have enough space to teach classes.
Century is the same. Century City,
Manhattan Beach. So we don't have the capability of teaching at all of their stores, but everyone that has space will teach class for them. And that happens 3 times a year. Our classes are 6 weeks in a row. And that's a good way to kind of get people who either are wanting to kind of dip their toe into training for the first time or want to train their dog in a completely different way than they ever have. And also it brings them into the store. So, we wouldn't work with them if we didn't completely agree with their philosophy and their mission and their products. I love that they work with local vendors too. They sell a lot of local things, which I think is great. And they're, everything is just really well sourced there. So their role basically is to send us a certain amount of leads every month. So, plenty of people who go shopping at Healthy Spot are in search of training, or, they'll just be like, my moose this week is starting to, chew up the furniture. I don't know what to do. Do you guys have a trainer you recommend? And they'll give them our information or have them sign up for group class. So it's a really great relationship. And they have helped us grow like crazy since we started working with them, which is amazing. And, they're growing like crazy at the same time. So when we first started, they were a little bit farther along than we were, but we were both kind of in the position to want to be growing a lot. So, we came together at a really good moment in time. But they're amazing to work with. We love everybody there. They're really positive. They're really receptive to our ideas, and we have lots of ideas. They don't all work out, but they never tell us anything is like not going to work. They always are really willing to work with us. So we really, really like working with them.
I think from the outside looking in, they look like they're doing it right. I mean, they're scaling this company, and they run it like a business. They're you see a lot of the smaller stores where it kind of lives and dies by the owner or one person. Where these guys they're building a company that I can see this continuing to scale. There could even be an international play. They've got a great name. I think the timing is right. And from the outside, they're doing a great job at actually building a culture, and that just speaks volumes to what they're doing.
Yeah.
And I'm looking from the outside. You're actually on the inside, so I think you see it firsthand that those guys they're doing it right for sure.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think what they're doing is amazing, and it's special, and it's pet stores in and of themselves aren't unique, but I think their specific way of doing it is very unique. And I think that's why they're growing so fast. They're opening their San Francisco store this weekend, actually. So that's super exciting.
Freaking killer. So for stores that are listening, pet service stores, I guess, what do you guys look for in a partner as you guys continue to grow?
I mean, as far as I can speak to Healthy Spot because we work really closely with them. Every time I go in there, I try and introduce myself, because we do work together, but I haven't met everyone that works at all of their stores. So I walk in and I'm a customer, and every time I go into any of their stores, someone approaches me, asks if I need help, is really friendly. I don't feel like they're being pushy. I don't feel like they hate their job. Everyone seems really happy to be there. Every time I introduce myself, they know what I mean when I say Tully's training, and they're really excited to talk about it. And they're like, "Oh, we're so glad that you're here. We had Mrs. So-and-so was just asking the other day, and we gave her your card." And it's just, I think making sure that the people who work for you, even if they don't love it, that they know how to interact with the customers. And, if they're having a bad day, not bringing that into it. And just, honestly, I don't feel like anyone who works for them doesn't like working for them. Mm-hmm. Everyone seems to genuinely be happy to be there. So I don't know exactly how they find that. I don't know what their process is as far as hiring people. But whatever it is, I think could be a whole other business because, it's hard to find people who love their job and know what they're doing and are good at it. So
I think it's a testament to you guys too. You guys are obviously doing something right. What do you, I guess, for other trainers that are listening to this, what do you guys attribute your success to? And obviously you're on the radar of Healthy Spot, which is one of, I would say one of the top pet service stores, definitely in the LA area. As they continue to grow, they'll start to kind of expand that reputation throughout the US, I'm guessing, at some point. I guess, what advice can you give to other trainers out there that may be, just a single trainer, or they're trying to kind of build a name and company? What can they do, with their own service, et cetera, so that they can, create the culture that you guys have created and kind of get to the point where you guys are at?
I mean, I would say be open, keep your mind open. You never know everything. I think that's kind of a wall that a lot of trainers hit sometimes, is especially when you first have started a business or you first have started training and you've learned a whole bunch of stuff all at once and you're really excited to apply it. And then you'll come up against something that makes sense and is proven, but is opposite of what you always thought. And there's kind of like a cognitive dissonance going on. Mm-hmm. And that's not helpful as far as growing as a company or just as an individual person or trainer. I think it's good to always keep your mind open. I'm someone who, if I hear something that I've never heard before, I'll go home and look it up. Because I want to better understand it before I either use it or disagree with it. So I think that that's first and foremost really important.
What about as far as getting started? Someone that, like you said, is just right out of, maybe taking classes. They're really excited. They want to open their own business. How do they get started? How do they get their first few clients? What did you guys do in the early days that you can share?
Well, I wasn't there in the very early days, mm-hmm. But I know that, the whole reason I met Mary was because she was offering training sessions, discounted training sessions to shelter adoptees.
Got it. Okay.
So, and then, we did a lot of work where we would go around to different pet-related businesses and vets' offices and tell them who we were and give them materials and say, if anyone asks for referrals, we're kind of new and this is where we come from and this is our information. So you have to pound the pavement at first. You got to let people know you exist, especially in LA where you're competing. No matter what you do, you're competing with hundreds of other people that do the same thing. So you have to go around and let people know that you're out there, whether that means, I think, even in this day and age of technology, I think even more so going in person makes an impact. So, we would physically walk into people's businesses and talk to them and tell them what we did. And I think a lot of people rely on websites and posting on social media, which is really important once you're established, I think. But getting out there, you're not going to be any different or you're not going to be special if you're just another person with a Facebook page, you know? So I would say that. And number two, I'd say once you are kind of established, don't be afraid to outsource. Our website
awesome.
Would not look this good if we hadn't had Alex, who is amazing at design. And we do have people that mention, I called you because your website looks so good.
Mm-hmm. If you guys get a chance, go to Tully's, TULLYS training.com. They do have one of the better websites. I mean, that's the first thing I mentioned to you when we first started talking is that, you guys are getting it right. You guys remember those that are in the industry, more people are going to come to your website than they ever will your front door. So you've got to get that right. And I feel like you guys have nailed it as far as, you've got a modern looking website. Mm-hmm. It clearly, it tells people what you do. If you look at, we're looking at it right now, customized dog training programs, and then, a refreshing approach to dog training, based on science and learning. You guys specifically tell people what you do at the very top, above mm-hmm. the fold. This is really big. I think that a lot of folks in the industry, and I get it, you're kind of starting, you don't have a huge budget, but I think you've got to make sure that you get your messaging right so people know exactly what you do. And how important is it to niche? Do you know if you guys niched at the very, early on when you guys started? Like perhaps with a certain type of breed or a specific type of dog, etc.
From the get-go, we've always worked with a lot of reactive dogs.
Okay.
I don't know that we were specifically looking to do that. It just kind of, you can't really avoid it if you're a dog trainer. And
there's an urgency there too.
Yeah.
So that's something, that's actually good.
Yeah.
It's not good for the dogs and the owner, but it's good in terms of business because there's that urgency that's set in.
Right. And I mean, honestly, if we had our way, we would focus more on puppies because as trainers, if you can get in there and work with puppies, ideally they wouldn't even grow up to have those issues, barring any kind of genetic complexities. But that's tougher because, people with puppies don't see, there's not that urgency there. Mm-hmm. They're dealing with like potty training, which is a pain in the butt, but it's not like their dog is trying to attack everyone they see. That happens later, but can be correlated to things that happen as a puppy. So, ideally, if you can work with people who just got puppies, you could potentially avoid those issues down the line. But, it is a tougher niche to fill, I think, because people don't understand how important it is at this point.
What's next for you guys? What's the evolution of Tully's?
Well, we just moved to Seattle. Okay. Mary and Alex, the co-founders of the company, moved there a couple years ago themselves, but we just had one of our trainers move up there. So we now have training capabilities in Seattle. We're hiring in San Francisco.
Beautiful.
So, we have trainers in LA and San Diego as well. Those have been our two kind of mainstays from the beginning. So, we want to keep growing at least up and down the West Coast, and maybe someday, our virtual side will grow, allow us to grow in other places too.
I'm a huge fan of you guys too. And, I wish you guys the best. I know you guys are obviously doing something right. For the listeners or, trainers or pet service stores that want to get in touch with you, what is the best way for them to do that?
I would say go to our website. It's just tullystraining.com. That has our email, our phone number. If you're a store that wants to contact us, there's somebody always monitoring those two feeds. You can contact us on our social media at Tully's Training on all of them, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. I think that's all we have right now. I know there's a lot of other things, but we're all of us owners are kind of on the these are what we use.
They're looking at their phones, you guys. Sara, it's so great to have you. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This was really fun.
Absolutely. Hey guys, we really hope you enjoyed this episode, and thanks so much for listening to the show this week. You can subscribe wherever you're listening, and we love feedback. So feel free to also leave us a review. You can also visit us on Instagram at Book with Pierre. Until next time, I'm Anthony Flores, and you're listening to The Shift, a pet service podcast.